Hey, this is Matt Peterson, Vice President of Education at the Claremont Institute and founding editor of The American Mind, with you here again to chat about a topic near and dear to my heart, and that is education. I want to talk particularly about the potential that red states offer us in a very dark landscape, a landscape in which really the educational system is completely, thoroughly corrupt. Both, for practical purposes, for kids trying to get jobs without debt, and also just intellectually in the deepest sense of teaching people how to be good humans and citizens. Our educational system has really reached an ending point. It's falling apart. And in the midst of all this talk is going to be about how red states could potentially initiate a new renaissance. How could they do that? Well, first, let's get clear on the problem. There's a lot of people who liked in conservative circles to rip on education, but they still get fancy degrees and respect them. They still respect credentialism. They still think in their heart of hearts, usually they're older people, that the system means something. The younger you are, the more you think the whole system is a joke and it doesn't mean much at all. And also, by the way, the less well-educated you likely are by the system because it has corrupted over time. Now, we are at the point where over half the country realizes that higher education is a problem and doesn't trust higher education and the institutions that used to be some of the most trusted institutions in the country. So there's a growing awareness that there's a problem. And this awareness that our educational system is broken is certainly higher now than it has been in living memory. And I would argue this is a good thing because, you need to understand the landscape before you fix it. But nonetheless, let's talk about why it hasn't been fixed first. Most Republicans, I was just talking to our board chairman about this in New York, and I think he's absolutely right. Most Republican politicians don't even think that education is their responsibility. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, most Republicans don't think they really have control over the educational system. That belongs to the other side. We need charter schools, right? Which we do. I'm all for them. And we need alternatives outside of the system. We can't even imagine changing the public system. Now, that's a losing attitude. And the problem Republicans have is they need to realize it is their job, constitutionally and otherwise, to rule education in some way. I know we've spent a long time trying to get rid of the Department of Education, unsuccessfully, I might add. We never even came close to getting rid of it. I know in many ways it's been unsuccessful and a proven failure. At the same time, the first 5 presidents of the United States wanted to create a national university because they knew how important education was. Government still has power over education in various ways, and that's important because education makes Republican citizenship possible. Without an educational system that teaches about citizenship, that teaches about civics and how government should and is and ought to work, we're done. We may already be done, given what we've done to ourselves in the last 70 years or so. But without that system of education, Republican government is over. So government has a legitimate interest in creating new citizens through public education that it takes tax dollars for. So Republican lawmakers need to realize one of the most important things they can do to save the country is to ensure that the public education system is actually teaching civics, citizenship, and everything else that it ought to be. Will they? That depends on whether you will help hold them accountable. But you and I and our leaders have had a loser mentality for a long time. And my example of this is that even in red states, there are whole systems getting rid of classical forms of education, getting rid of, calling these classic books that everyone used to read racist, etc. I mean, this is insane. This is happening in red states as well as blue ones, though. And even in red states, the state boards are many times run by the same kind of programmatic, technocratic libs, if not by some woke, tards mixed in there saying all kinds of insane kind of things. So right now you have to ask yourself, if you're in a red state, how do you get around this? What do you need to do to change? Well, the good news is if you're in charge and you're a politician, the people are actually on your side. They know how bad things are. So you have a rare opportunity as a leader or a lawmaker to get out in front of something that will be popular. People know the system is broken and they want radical change. And what we need to do in red states where it is possible, because it's not possible everywhere else, nationally and in blue states, is to start proposing far more radical educational solutions, policy solutions than we have in the past. What does that look like? That means actually requiring, for instance, that people who teach American history and civics in government, this is kind of crazy, so hear me out, actually know something about American history, civics, and government. I know that's a crazy idea. And what if Republicans actually were in charge of what it means to know? In other words, they changed the regulations and the tests that you had to pass in order to teach civics, government, and history of America in the K through 12 system, or even beyond. They could certainly do that. There's all kinds of rules and regulations about what makes a teacher, valid to credential someone who can teach in the K through 12 system in various states. You think the red state leaders couldn't, if they really had some creative types around them, rethink how to credential people in a way that ensures they actually know and will teach something true about American history, civics, and can you believe with me that this is possible? Because I think most of us don't even think it's possible. I think most of us think, oh, that's crazy. Next thing you know, you'll want to politicize who's on the state boards of ed, and we'll actually have serious elections about who's in charge of our education system in red states. That would be crazy. No, of course, that would not be crazy. That would be the height of sanity. We need to politicize. In other words, make a political issue out of who runs the educational system in these red states. And there are all kinds of bold solutions that could be pushed forward to actually solve this problem. I think the pathetic thing that Republicans often do is say, oh, we couldn't dictate what the curriculum is in the public schools that we're actually in charge of because we take everyone's money for them. We couldn't dictate them. That'd be kind of tyrannical. And you sit there and think, are you serious? This is what the left has done for 70 years. Someone's going to dictate what the curriculum is. They're dictating what it is not. They're getting rid of classical books. They're making the kids dumber by the year. They're teaching all kinds of crazy ideology. You are in charge of this. If you're in a red state and you're a Republican, it's time to do something about it. It's probably already too late. Many people think. I'm not saying it is. But if you want to have any prayer of solving the problem in America, you are going to have to educate a generation of citizens not to hate their country and to understand some basic truths about their history. And that's just one subject, folks. But it's the one that government is most legitimate when it wants to regulate or ensure that certain standards are met. We have to produce citizens, not anti-citizens. That's what we're doing now. And let me tell you, this has already proceeded. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. Every 10 years, people say, oh, I can't believe the schools are this bad. Oh, I can't believe it's this crazy. And now we're at the point where it's literally a joke, where any country that's serious is going to produce better people in various sectors than we do in our schools. And for most people, it's not even worth it really to go to school anymore. That's the direction we're heading. We're heading towards a large population of peasants overseen by a few oligarchic elite overlords. That's where we're going. That's where we're headed. So, until Republican leaders and donors take this seriously as a civilizational regime-level crisis, which it is. We've already passed that point years ago. We are not going to solve this problem. But this rant infused and brought to you by a little doers in this beautiful little cup. You can look up online where to purchase these. Not even an advertisement. This little talk ends with this hopeful note that there's no reason why this isn't possible in many red states, in many smaller states. And they can provide, as they always have throughout American history, a model for other people to follow. Imagine if one state, North Dakota, Idaho, South Dakota, even a small state, actually passed legislation that really helped to, radically reform their K through 12 system and their university system. And you had just a flock of people just migrated there who had talent, who wanted to teach American principles in this way. You would set a standard and you would set a model that other states could then follow. And also, by the way, it would allow the American people to choose the kind of education they want. If they liked the education that was provided in this state that had actually reformed its system, then, and attracted the right kinds of teachers, then people who wanted that education would flock there. And this would be good for everybody, and it would show a kind of a model solution. Now, there are people and organizations out there that do a good job of educating, particularly American history and American government is the area I know. There are places and states that have some interesting models already going. But until we really have a red state really root and branch reform their K through 12 and their university system, we're just nibbling around the edges of the problem. We do need to create alternative institutions. We do need to allow for charters. But at the end of the day, if we're going to be winners, we need to say, no, the power of government is such that it controls public education and it has an interest to ensure that public education actually educates the public into the kind of citizens that we want and deserve. And until we realize that and take it over and work towards establishing that kind of educational system, we'll always be losers. Oh, well, maybe I have a few charter schools and we can teach some kind of sane things there. I have enough money to send my kids to the private schools, so I'll avoid what the peasantry is learning. I mean, these are not solutions. And at the end of the day, we want to win, and it's going to start in red states. Thank you.